The DNA from the glove found 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home has been running through genealogy databases for weeks. Tonight, investigators have a name, not a suspect, not a person of interest, a name. So why has no arrest been announced? And what is the FBI waiting for? Subscribe right now and turn on the bell. This channel posts the moment an arrest is confirmed in this case. That moment is no longer weeks away. Subscribe, hit the bell. You cannot afford to miss that video, because here is what forensic genealogy does that every other investigative tool in this case cannot. DNA does not lie. DNA does not remember the wrong night. DNA does not have a lawyer. DNA does not maintain 38 days of careful public silence while the family of its victim disintegrates on camera. The night trial glove found on February 13th, 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's front gate, carries the complete genetic profile of one unknown male. No match in CODIS. No match in the FBI's 19 million offender profiles. But CODIS is not the database that ends this case. Forensic genealogy is. And forensic genealogy does not need the suspect's own DNA to be in any system. It needs one relative, one cousin, one sibling, one parent who uploaded their genetic profile to Ancestry or 23, and me without any understanding of what that data would eventually be used to find. That relative exists. The tree is built. The name at the end of it has been sitting inside this investigation for days. And the silence coming out of the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI's Phoenix field office right now is not the silence of an investigation that does not know. It is the silence of a prosecution that is almost ready to move. There is a specific kind of silence that settles over a federal investigation when it transitions from building a case to preparing to execute it. It is different from the silence of a stalled investigation. Different from the silence of an investigation with no leads. Those silences feel empty, uncertain. They produce press conferences with careful language about ongoing efforts and active leads and investigators following every available thread. They produce sheriffs at podiums asking the public for patience. This silence is different. This silence is full, dense. The silence of a room where everyone present knows something that has not been announced. Where the language of the press releases has been reviewed by federal prosecutors rather than public affairs officers, where the word used is not ongoing but prepared, not searching but building, not following leads but closing distance. The Nancy Guthrie investigation entered that silence approximately 12 days ago. The transition was visible to anyone reading the operational language carefully. The shift from Tucson to Phoenix, the reduction from 400 personnel to a focused detective unit, the cessation of public evidence releases that had been coming regularly in the first 3 weeks. The last significant public statement from the Pima County Sheriff's Department was not an update about new leads. It was a statement about the investigation's transition to a new phase, a long-term phase, a phase with a different objective than the one that preceded it. The objective is no longer finding Nancy Guthrie. The objective is proving beyond a reasonable doubt in a federal courtroom who took her and who designed the architecture of that taking, and the instrument that is going to deliver the foundational proof for that prosecution is not the cell tower records, not the vehicle identification, not the financial documents, not the 5 federal searches of a specific address in Oro Valley. The foundational instrument is the DNA, the profile on the glove, the tree being built around it, and the name at the end of that tree that investigators have been working toward since the morning of February 14th. That name is the subject of this video. To understand why the DNA trail in this case is not a possibility but a certainty, you need to understand what forensic genealogy actually is and why it does not fail. Start here. CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, contains more than 19 million genetic profiles. Every person convicted of a qualifying felony offense in the United States has their DNA in this system. When investigators submit an unknown profile to CODIS, the system searches for an exact match, a direct hit. The unknown DNA either belongs to someone already in the database or it does not. The glove profile came back with no match. The unknown male whose genetic material is on that glove has no qualifying criminal conviction in any jurisdiction that feeds the national database. In the old model of DNA investigation, that result was a dead end. Case goes cold. Glove goes into evidence storage. Suspect remains unknown indefinitely. Forensic investigative genetic genealogy is a completely different methodology. It does not search for the suspect's own DNA. It searches for their family. It uploads the unknown profile to commercial genealogy databases, GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA, and through legal process, Ancestry, and 23andMe, and searches for partial matches, not exact matches, partial. The kind of match that appears when two people share a great-grandparent, a common ancestor from 3 or 4 generations back, a genetic overlap that does not identify the suspect directly, but places them on a family tree. Once a partial match is found, genealogists begin constructing the tree outward from that shared ancestor. They identify every descendant branch, every cousin, every sibling, every child. They cross-reference those names against the FBI's physical profile, against the geographic parameters of the case, against the behavioral evidence, and they narrow, branch by branch, generation by generation, until the tree has one living male whose age, geography, physical profile, and family connections align with every parameter of the investigation. That process identified the Golden State Killer after 44 years. Joseph James D'Angelo, dozens of murders, decades of failure by every other investigative method available. One genealogy database submission, one partial match from a distant relative, one tree built outward from that match, one name at the end of it that had been living in plain sight for 4 decades. The Nancy Guthrie case has been running this process since the glove profile was confirmed on February 13th. That is 22 days of genealogy database processing as of this recording. The Golden State Killer case took approximately 4 months from database submission to arrest. But that case was working from a much older, lower quality DNA sample and a much larger geographic search area. The Guthrie glove produced a clean, high-quality profile from a fresh sample in a geographically constrained metropolitan area with a limited suspect pool defined by the behavioral and physical evidence already in hand. The timeline compresses dramatically when the parameters are this specific. 22 days is not a short time. It is long enough. The genealogy process does not operate in isolation. It operates against a target profile, a set of parameters that every candidate emerging from the family tree construction must match before they are elevated as a priority subject. And the Nancy Guthrie investigation has one of the most precisely defined suspect profiles in any active kidnapping case in the country right now. The FBI's Forensic Video Analysis Unit measured the subject in the doorbell camera footage with what former FBI Executive Assistant Director Joshua School described as extremely accurate technology. They erected a white tent over Nancy Guthrie's front entrance. They replicated the exact nighttime lighting conditions of February 1st. They dressed agents in replica clothing and ran measurements under infrared. The result was unambiguous. The subject is a male between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10. Average build, dark facial hair, a mustache or goatee visible beneath the lower edge of the mask, a marking on the right wrist identified by former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente as possibly a tattoo visible through the gap between glove and jacket sleeve in infrared footage. Geographic parameters further compress the candidate pool. The 9-day rehearsal on January 23rd places the subject in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson on a specific date at a specific time. The February 1st footage places them there again. Cell tower records from both dates, already in federal hands, narrow the field of devices present in that corridor during both windows. The vehicle captured at 2:36 a.m. by the Strategoulis Ring camera connects to a specific make and model being cross-referenced against Arizona MVD registration records. The Ozark Trail backpack, a Walmart-exclusive product, generates a purchase trail. The belly band holster identified as mismatched generates a retail trace. Every one of those parameters is a filter. Every candidate name emerging from the genealogy tree gets run through every filter simultaneously. Height range, geographic presence, age profile, physical description match, criminal history, connection to the Guthrie family network, connection to the specific addresses and routes visible in the investigation. The filters do not operate sequentially, they operate in parallel. And when a name passes every filter at the same time, that name moves from genealogy candidate to primary investigative subject. That movement has already happened in this case. The operational silence confirms it. The Phoenix transition confirms it. The cessation of public evidence releases confirms it. An investigation still searching for a candidate does not go quiet. An investigation that has found its candidate and is building its prosecution does. The glove is one profile. It belongs to the operative, the person on the porch, the person whose genetic material was deposited on a nitrile glove found 2 miles from the crime scene on a route consistent with the exit path of the vehicle captured at 2:36 a.m. That profile is the one running through genealogy databases. That profile is the one generating a family tree. That profile is the one producing a name. But there is a second profile, and the second profile is the one that closes the architecture of this entire conspiracy. Biological material recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's residence itself, confirmed publicly by the Pima County Sheriff, produced what investigators describe as a mixed DNA profile. Multiple contributors. The laboratory in Florida processing this sample is working to separate the individual genetic sequences from the mixture. That separation process is technically more complex than working from a single contributor sample. It takes longer, but it produces something that the glove profile alone cannot. The glove profile identifies the operative, the individual who approached the front door, who wore the mask and the mismatched holster and the nitrile gloves and carried the Ozark Trail backpack with its transport kit contents. The operative whose height and build and dark facial hair are documented in the FBI's forensic measurements. The interior profile identifies someone who was inside that residence under circumstances that require explanation. The presence of a second person's genetic material inside Nancy Guthrie's home, in a location and context consistent with the circumstances of her disappearance, is the biological record of the conspiracy's architecture, not just who executed it, who was present in the environment that made it possible, who was inside the house, who was inside the trust, who was inside the information circle that former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole identified as the source of every piece of operational intelligence the operative needed to approach that door without hesitation at 1:47 in the morning. 2 profiles, 2 contributors, 2 separate individuals whose biological material is present at the same crime scene. The glove on the exit road, the interior sample inside the home, 1 operative, 1 architect, and a Florida laboratory that is currently in the process of separating the mixture and running the individual sequences against every available database. When both profiles resolve simultaneously, when the genealogy tree delivers the operative's name, and the mixture separation delivers the architect's, the federal prosecution will move on both targets at the same moment, not sequentially, simultaneously, because premature arrest of one alerts the other. The FBI learned this from decades of organized crime prosecutions. You do not move on the first target until you are ready to move on all of them, at the same time, with the same evidence, with no warning that gives anyone the opportunity to run. Here's the detail that connects the DNA evidence to the behavioral evidence in a way that creates a prosecutorial picture more powerful than either produces alone. The genealogy process builds a family tree from a partial genetic match. It narrows that tree against physical and geographic parameters. But there is a third parameter that the investigators running this process apply that receives almost no public attention: behavioral consistency. The question of whether a candidate's documented behavior in the period following the crime is consistent with guilty knowledge. Innocent people whose DNA appears in a genealogy tree as a candidate match behave in predictable ways when investigators approach them. They are confused, they cooperate immediately. They provide explanations for any possible connection to the crime scene. They submit voluntarily to elimination samples. They do the things that people do when they are being asked about something they had no part in and want to help resolve as quickly as possible. People with guilty knowledge behave differently. They have already calculated the investigation's trajectory. They have already assessed what they know and what investigators might be able to prove. They have already consulted attorneys, sometimes before investigators ever make contact, and calibrated every public and private action to minimize legal exposure. Their cooperation is strategic, their statements are precise, their public behavior is managed, and their silence, when silence is the safest option, is maintained with a discipline that innocent people almost never sustain. 38 days of complete public silence from one specific individual, in this case, is the behavioral profile of someone who has calculated that every word is a liability. Not grief, not privacy. Calculation. The distinction matters in a federal prosecution because behavioral evidence of consciousness of guilt is admissible. The pattern of a person's actions and deliberate inactions in the aftermath of a crime they are connected to can be presented to a jury as evidence of knowledge, as evidence of participation, as evidence that the silence itself is a form of concealment. When the genealogy tree delivers a name that matches the physical profile and the behavioral profile simultaneously. When the person at the end of that genetic sequence is also the person whose documented post-crime behavior is consistent with every marker of guilty knowledge, the prosecution's case does not have a gap. It has a foundation, built from biology and behavior simultaneously, built from the glove and the silence in equal measure. The DNA trail is not operating alone. It is the primary instrument of a convergence that has been assembling since February 2nd, 2026. Every thread of this investigation is terminating at the same coordinates, and the coordinates are not approximate. They are specific enough to support a federal indictment. The cell tower records place specific devices in the Catalina Foothills corridor on February 1st between midnight and 4 a.m. The same records covering January 23rd establish the pattern of prior presence that converts a single night data point into a documented behavioral signature. The vehicle captured at 2:36 a.m. is being cross-referenced against license plate reader data from every arterial road in northern Tucson. The Walmart backpack purchase trail leads to a transaction record. The holster trace leads to a retail purchase log. The financial documents examined in the context of this investigation connect a specific name to the victim's asset arrangements. The 5 federal searches of a specific residential address represent 5 separate judicial authorizations. 5 separate federal judges reviewing the FBI's evidence and determining that sufficient probable cause exists to authorize reentry. The DNA sits at the center of all of that. Because the DNA is the one piece of evidence that bypasses everything else. That does not depend on cell tower coverage or camera angles or purchase records or behavioral interpretation. The DNA is the suspect's own body testifying against them. Left on a glove, left on a back road, left 2 miles from the home of an 84-year-old woman who was specifically chosen, specifically studied, and specifically taken by someone whose genetic material is now inside a laboratory in Florida being matched against a family tree that has been building for 22 days. The $1 million reward, expanded to $1.2 million since Savannah Guthrie's announcement, is sitting on the table in front of every person inside this operation who is currently calculating the distance between what they know and what that number changes. That calculation has ended every conspiracy of this nature in the history of federal prosecution. Not with DNA, not with cell tower records, with one person who decides the money is worth more than the loyalty, with one phone call, one name, one address. That call may already have been made. The FBI does not announce tip line results in active prosecutions. They use them quietly. They fold the information into the case they are already building. And when the case is ready, when the DNA and the cell records and the financial documents and the tip line information and the 5 judicial authorizations all point at the same name simultaneously, the arrest comes without warning. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had a pacemaker. She played mahjong. She attended Bible study. She was the mother of a woman the entire country watches every morning. She was chosen, studied, taken from the home she occupied for 5 decades by people who left their biology at the scene, and on the road they fled down. That biology is in a laboratory right now, being processed, being matched, being built into the foundational proof of a federal prosecution that will end the silence that has lasted 38 days. The DNA trail does not stall, it does not negotiate, it does not maintain. Careful public silence while evidence accumulates around it. It builds, branch by branch, name by name, until the tree has one person left at the end of it. And that person's name is already inside this investigation. The arrest is not a question. It is a timeline, and the timeline is shorter than anyone outside this investigation currently knows. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. This community has been ahead of the official timeline from the beginning. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes live the moment an arrest is confirmed. That video will name the name. It will connect every thread this channel has been building across 5 weeks. You need to be in the room. Share this with everyone following this case. The DNA does not care how long the silence has lasted. It only cares about the match. And the match has been made. She deserves justice. This case is not over, but it is closer than it has ever been.